The GPS had been guiding Andrew through the narrow, beat-up streets of one of Chicago's rougher neighborhoods for what felt like forever. Every pothole rattled his car so hard that he worried about damaging the rims. The roads were a mess, and his patience was wearing thin. Finally, the familiar, overly cheerful voice of the GPS announced, "You have arrived at your destination." Andrew exhaled, annoyed, as he parked by the curb and took a long look around. He'd never been to this part of Chicago before, and from the looks of it, he'd rather not come here again. The place was a wasteland of rundown buildings, broken windows, and crumbling sidewalks. In the distance, the screech of tires echoed, followed by a distant shout. Not exactly the kind of place where one would want to hold a business meeting. He scanned the area until his eyes landed on a dingy old building with a faded sign, "Comfort." "Yeah, right." Andrew raised an eyebrow at the name. This was the hotel? How could anyone choose to stay in a dump like this unless they were either broke or desperate? If the guy he was meeting set up shop here, that was already a huge red flag. But Andrew was a professional. He wasn't the type to back out of a commitment, even if his gut was telling him to get the hell out. He climbed out of his car, making sure he wasn't blocking traffic, and headed toward the entrance. The rusty doors groaned as he pushed them open, and the musty smell hit him like a wall. Inside, it was just as grim as he'd expected. Old carpets, dusty corners, and peeling wallpaper. Before he could take a full step, a balding man in a stretched-out sweater hurried over to greet him, hand outstretched. The guy didn't look much better than the building. His sweater sagged, his pants were wrinkled, and his shoes, let's just say they'd seen better days. Andrew instantly regretted agreeing to this meeting. Man, if this guy looks like this, his business can't be much better, he thought. The man suggested they sit in the hotel bar to talk business, but Andrew had already checked out mentally. He knew nothing good was going to come from this. His attention, however, was suddenly pulled in a completely different direction. At the reception desk stood a woman whose silhouette and hairstyle were unmistakably familiar. His stomach twisted, and his heart skipped a beat. He knew this woman, even if he didn't want to admit it. Andrew couldn't believe what he was seeing. The woman standing at the hotel reception desk wasn't alone. She was practically glued to some guy, her hands constantly finding their way to his arm or adjusting his tie. It wasn't just casual contact. It was intimate, almost possessive. The guy? He was dressed like he was trying to impress, wearing a suit that pretended to be sleek and polished. But Andrew, with his keen eye for detail, could tell right away. That suit was cheap, and the watch on his wrist? A knockoff. A fake, like everything else about this scene. There was no question what was going on between these two. This wasn't just some casual business meeting at a rundown hotel in a shady part of town. No, people came to places like this when they wanted to be discreet, when they were hiding something, like an affair. It was always the same. Married men or women slipping away for a couple of hours, pretending the world outside didn't exist. But today, something about this felt especially personal. Andrew recognized the woman almost immediately. He didn't want to believe it, but deep down, he already knew. She finished filling out some paperwork at the front desk, then grabbed the guy's hand and started pulling him toward the stairs. As they headed up to the second floor, she glanced back for a split second, and their eyes met. Andrew felt a jolt of electricity shoot through his body. Time seemed to slow down, and in that brief moment, it was like everything fell into place. It was Lauren, Jack's wife. Andrew stood there, rooted to the spot, his mind spinning out of control. How could this be happening? He had always felt there was something off about Lauren. She had never sat right with him. Maybe it was the way her eyes always seemed too calculating, or the way her smile never reached them. If he had the chance, he would have told Jack not to marry her, but Jack was head over heels in love. Nothing Andrew could have said would have changed his mind. "Sorry, it looks like we won't be able to finalize the deal today," Andrew mumbled to the business rep, barely aware of what he was saying. His mind was already somewhere else. Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked out of the hotel, leaving the guy confused and staring after him. When Andrew reached his car, he sat behind the wheel, his breath coming in sharp gasps. He didn't even start the engine. He just sat there, trying to process what he had just seen. The woman he had just locked eyes with wasn't some stranger. It was Lauren, Jack's wife, and she was heading upstairs with another man, not for any business deal. Anger flared up inside him. He wanted to rush over to Jack and tell him everything. But how? What would he even say? "Hey, buddy, I just saw your wife cheating on you." This was a nightmare, and there was no waking up from it. Andrew and Jack had been friends for what felt like a lifetime. They grew up together, side by side from their first days in school. It all started on their very first day of first grade. Jack had this massive bouquet of roses, all proud and smiling, and kept accidentally whacking Andrew with it. At first, it was just a little annoying, but after a few too many scratches from those damn thorns, Andrew snapped. Without a second thought, he threw a punch. Jack didn't hesitate either. They both went at it, rolling around on the ground, trading punches and kicks like seasoned brawlers, while the teacher tried to pull them apart. The whole school watched in shock as the two boys, who had just met, began their friendship with a fist fight. That fight wasn't their last. Oh no, they had plenty more before they realized by the end of that first school year that they weren't enemies, but best friends. They were inseparable after that. Whether it was sports, school trips, or just hanging out, they did everything together. They were like two halves of the same coin, always side by side, looking out for each other. After high school, though, life took them down slightly different paths. Andrew's family had a bit more cash, so he went off to a prestigious university. Jack, on the other hand, opted for a more practical route and enrolled in a technical college. At first, Andrew worried that their friendship might drift apart. After all, college life was demanding, and they were meeting new people. But nothing could break their bond. They still met up every weekend, hit the bars, and shared everything with each other, just like old times. And it was during one of those nights out that Jack met Lauren. Andrew remembered that night like it was yesterday. Lauren was beautiful, but not in a loud, attention-seeking way. She dressed with quiet elegance. Her makeup was subtle but flawless. But what really stuck with Andrew was her eyes. There was something cold and calculating in them that made him uneasy from the get-go. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but something about her just didn't sit right with him. Andrew had always trusted his gut, and this time was no different. He was sure that Lauren wasn't with Jack because she loved him, but because he was an easy target. If she had shown the slightest interest in Andrew, he was sure it wouldn't be because of attraction. It'd be because Andrew was more successful, more stable. But Jack? Jack was head over heels in love, completely blind to any of Lauren's flaws. The deeper he fell for her, the more confident he became that she was the one. Eventually, Jack proposed, and Andrew, of course, stood by his side as the best man. The wedding was grand, filled with laughter and joy, but Andrew couldn't shake that uneasy feeling in the pit of his stomach. He distracted himself by flirting with one of the bridesmaids, but it wasn't anything serious. His mind kept drifting back to Lauren, wondering what her real motives were. 8 years had passed since Jack's wedding, and a lot had changed. Jack seemed to have found his place in life, settling into his role as a husband, while Andrew remained single. Not that he was alone. There was always a beautiful girl by his side, but none of them stuck around for long. Andrew wasn't ready for something serious. He was waiting for the one, someone beautiful, intelligent, and, above all, loyal. He wasn't in any rush. His standards were high, and he wasn't going to settle for less. And now, his gut was telling him that maybe, just maybe, he'd been right about Lauren all along. He was almost ready to admit he might have been wrong about Lauren. Almost. And then, bam! Reality hit him like a freight train, shattering any trace of doubt. Andrew sat in his car, fingers tapping restlessly against the steering wheel, his mind spinning like a tornado. Every muscle in his body tensed with the overwhelming urge to drive straight to Jack's place and drop the bomb. Tell him everything about Lauren's betrayal. But deep down, Andrew knew better. Jack wouldn't believe him. Hell, Jack still worshipped the ground Lauren walked on, convinced she was the perfect wife, the dream girl he'd always imagined. No, Jack wouldn't just take Andrew's word for it. He needed more, cold, hard evidence. Andrew took a deep breath, then made his way back into the hotel, his phone already out, thumbs sliding over the screen to turn on the voice recorder. This wasn't going to be easy, but Andrew was determined. He approached the front desk, heart pounding, but his expression remained calm. "Excuse me," he started, his voice steady, though inside, he was anything but, "The woman who just went upstairs with a guy. Does she come here often?" The girl behind the desk looked startled, blinking at the unexpected question. She gave him a nervous smile, clearly trying to stick to the script. "I'm sorry, but we're not allowed to provide that kind of information," she replied, her tone professional, almost robotic. But Andrew wasn't leaving without answers. Sliding a neatly folded bill across the counter, he waited. It didn't take long. Her demeanor shifted instantly. Glancing around to make sure no one was watching, she pocketed the cash and leaned in, lowering her voice. "Yeah, she's a regular. Once a week, at least. Always with the same guy." Andrew's stomach dropped. He swallowed hard, thanking her quietly as he turned off the recorder. This was just the beginning. He still needed visual proof. Words alone weren't enough to break through the fantasy Jack had built around Lauren. Stepping back outside, Andrew returned to his car and settled in for what could be a long wait. He was ready for it, no matter how long it took. This wasn't just any friend. This was Jack, his best friend, practically his brother. Andrew wasn't going to let him keep living in the dark, no matter what. Tonight, he'd get the proof Jack needed to finally see the truth. Andrew sat in his car for hours, every minute stretching into what felt like an eternity. His eyes never left the front doors of the hotel. He could feel the anticipation building inside him like a storm, waiting to burst. Then, finally, the moment he dreaded but needed came. Lauren stepped out, clinging to that guy like they were glued together. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Before they got into a cab, she leaned in and kissed him. Not some casual peck either, but a full-blown kiss that left no room for doubt. Andrew snapped photos like a man possessed, capturing every damning detail with his phone's camera. He got it all: the hand-holding, the kiss, the looks they exchanged. It was all there, clear as day. Heart racing, Andrew threw his car into gear and sped off, determined to beat them to Jack's place. He had to tell Jack before Lauren got home and spun some web of lies. But fate wasn't on his side tonight. Cops pulled him over in the middle of downtown, and they were relentless, checking every single document as if they were waiting for him to slip up. It was infuriating, the minutes ticking by, and all he could think about was Lauren getting home before him. When they finally let him go, Andrew knew it was too late. Pulling up outside Jack's house, he saw the lights already on. Lauren was inside. She had beaten him. Sitting in his car, Andrew gripped the steering wheel, staring at the house like it was mocking him. He couldn't wait any longer. He dialed Jack's number, his heart pounding in his chest. "Lauren home?" Andrew asked, his voice tight. "Yeah, she just walked in," Jack replied, his voice casual, unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. "Come outside, man. I'm parked right in front of your house," Andrew said, trying to keep his tone calm. A few minutes later, Jack climbed into the car, looking at Andrew with confusion written all over his face. "What's going on?" Jack asked, concern creeping into his voice. Andrew didn't waste any time. He turned to his best friend, knowing his words would change everything. "Lauren's cheating on you, Jack. And it's been going on for a while." Andrew's voice was firm, despite the ache in his chest. "I know you're not going to believe me, not just like that. You think she's perfect, your saint of a wife. But I'll tell you everything. I had a meeting today at this crappy hotel called Comfort. I didn't even know the place existed. And guess what? That's where I saw your wife. She went upstairs with some dude in a cheap-ass suit." Jack's face was unreadable, but Andrew pushed on, knowing he had to keep going. "I know you're gonna need proof, so I took pictures. Look for yourself." Andrew held up his phone, the images lighting up the screen, undeniable proof staring Jack right in the face. Andrew watched in silence as Jack, his hands trembling like leaves in a storm, scrolled through the gallery on his phone. Each new photo seemed to drain the color from Jack's face. He didn't want to believe it. It was like his whole world was crumbling with each swipe. But then he landed on the photo of the kiss. That was it. His entire body stiffened, and with a sudden, sharp intake of breath, Jack practically threw the phone onto the dashboard like it had burned him. Andrew sat there, waiting. He knew there was more to reveal. The audio recording from the receptionist, the cold, hard confirmation of Lauren's regular visits to this dingy hotel. He offered carefully, "I've got an audio recording too. Talk to the girl at the front desk. She says Lauren's a regular here. Like, once a week, at least. Want to listen?" He reached for his phone again, ready to play the damning evidence, but Jack snapped, his voice hoarse and desperate. "No. No, man. I don't need to hear it. I believe you. I've seen enough." His words were full of pain, barely held together by the last threads of control. Jack's hands shook as he fumbled with the door handle, barely managing to open it. His usually calm, steady eyes were wild now, a storm of betrayal and fury brewing inside him. For a brief moment, Andrew felt a flicker of fear for his friend. What if Jack did something drastic, something that couldn't be undone? But then, a part of him thought, maybe she deserves whatever's coming. Jack staggered out of the car, heading toward the house where his marriage had just shattered, leaving Andrew alone in the car. He didn't follow. He knew there was nothing more he could do. Whatever was about to go down between Jack and Lauren, it was inevitable. Andrew didn't head home right away. He just sat there, lost in thought, until his phone buzzed. It was Jack. "Andrew, dude, can we just get drunk? I'm feeling so sick right now. You have no idea." Andrew sighed. Yeah, he knew exactly what Jack was feeling. I do, man. Trust me, I do. Hold tight. I'll park and grab a cab. Meet you at our bar. A little later, Andrew was sitting across from Jack at their usual spot, watching as his friend drowned his sorrows in shot after shot. Jack's face was a mess, streaked with tears and frustration. He kept mumbling incoherently, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand, muttering the same thing over and over. How could she do this to me, Andrew? How? Andrew's business trip, initially scheduled for just a couple of days, ended up stretching into a full week. Each day blurred into the next. Meetings, documents, endless negotiations. But his thoughts kept drifting back to Jack. Neither of them had reached out in all that time. Andrew knew exactly why. Jack was probably drowning in the mess that came with such a betrayal. Divorce wasn't just paperwork. It was a whole new reality. After being married for so long, adjusting to life without Lauren must have been brutal for Jack. When Andrew finally got back from his trip, he didn't even consider calling Jack. He drove straight to his apartment, feeling a need to check on his friend, to see how he was holding up. But nothing could have prepared Andrew for what greeted him. When he knocked on the door, it was Lauren who opened it. She stood there, practically glowing, her hair perfectly styled and a brand new pair of gold hoop earrings catching the light. Oh, hey Andrew, she chirped, her voice annoyingly cheerful. Come on in, Jack's in the room, but I'm heading out. She brushed past him in a cloud of expensive perfume, barely giving him a chance to respond before she disappeared out the door. Andrew was left standing there, confused and boiling inside. What the hell was Lauren doing here? He stepped inside, making his way to the room where Jack sat. When Jack looked up and saw him, there was a flicker of embarrassment on his face. Andrew, I thought you were still on your trip. When did you get back? Andrew's jaw tightened as he shot back. Doesn't matter when I got back. What the hell is Lauren doing here? I thought you were getting a divorce. Jack's eyes dropped to the floor. His voice was barely audible. We're not getting divorced. Andrew froze for a second, disbelief flooding his mind. What? What do you mean you're not getting divorced? His voice was harsh, each word cutting like a blade. Are you serious? We talked. She apologized, said it would never happen again. Jack's tone was shaky, as if he didn't quite believe his own words. So, I forgave her. Andrew snapped. You forgave her? After everything? Dude, what is wrong with you? Jack's eyes darted away again. His shoulders slumped in defeat. I get it now, man. It's my fault. I wasn't giving her enough attention, and she found support somewhere else. Andrew couldn't believe what he was hearing. He paced the room, practically vibrating with anger. Seriously? You think this is your fault? There are families out there who barely get by, but that doesn't give wives a free pass to cheat. Real men don't forgive cheating, Jack. His eyes landed on Lauren's new earrings. And those earrings? You bought those, right? Yeah, I bought them. So what? I love her, Andrew. You wouldn't get it. You've never really loved anyone, have you? You're fine being alone, right? Andrew stared at him, disbelief turning to disgust. Man, that's not love. Someone who loves you wouldn't do this. Jack shot back, his voice filled with frustration. You don't get to judge me. I love her, and I can't live without her. Andrew's face hardened as he realized something. Their friendship was over. Shaking his head, he replied, I can't listen to this anymore, Jack. You're not a man, and you're definitely not my friend anymore. Without another word, he stormed out of the apartment. Sitting in his car, Andrew gripped the steering wheel, his anger boiling over. He pulled out his phone and deleted Jack's number. It was over. They were done.